Welcome to Module 3, Sharpening Your Interview Skills. The purpose of this module is to focus on the interview process and use an employer's perspective to determine how to make a good and professional first impression through interview clothing and other nonverbal communication. Sharpening your interview skills includes 3 lessons. First impressions. We can't stop others from making a first impression. However, we do have some control over making a good first impression. We all know that sometimes actions speak louder than words. After we make our first impression, we also have some tools that'll help our actions speak well. And finally, we'll analyze an interview by using an evaluation chart, which you can use for your own preparation. First impressions are made very quickly. And as I said earlier, fortunately, we do have some control over how others perceive us. In this lesson, we'll be covering ways that we can create a positive first impression even before we begin speaking. So how long does it take to make a first impression? Well, as I said before, very quickly. According to research, first impressions are made anywhere from 2 to 30 seconds. It's certainly less than 30 seconds, and in our preparation, we're going to count on it being only about 2 seconds. One tool that we can use to make a good first impression before we even begin speaking is Attire. Wait a minute, I mean interview attire. That's better. Before anything else, mannerisms, body language, or any other nonverbal communication, your clothing is noticed first, and it plays a tremendous role in forming a first impression. What you wear to an interview is important to making a good first impression. 2 things to remember is 1, clothing worn during an interview may be appropriate for some industries but not for others. For example, a 3-piece suit might not be appropriate in an interview for a construction job. On the other hand, a polo shirt, khakis, and nice shoes might not be appropriate for an interview as a certified public accountant for a major accounting firm. And 2, clothing worn during an interview is different than clothing worn on the job. For example, a nurse would not wear their scrubs to an interview. By the same token, a welder should not wear their welding mask to an interview. What you wear to an interview is important to making a good first impression. 2 things to remember is 1, clothing worn during an interview may be appropriate for some industries but not for others. For example, if we take a look at our High Skill, High Growth Occupational Handbook found on Workforce Solutions website at wrksolutions.com, if we were to select different occupations and different industries, we might see, for example, 3-piece suit might not be appropriate in an interview for a construction job. On the other hand, a polo shirt, khakis, and nice shoes might not be appropriate for an interview as a certified public accountant for a major accounting firm. With that in mind, we're going to have some tips to help you dress the part. Overall, we should dress conservatively, and no, I'm not referring to politics. Dressing conservatively simply means there are no surprises. Think quality over quantity. As we go through the following tips, you'll begin to see what I'm talking about. Our first tip is to be well groomed. Now that may seem rather obvious, but it bears repeating. Of course, your hair should be well groomed. Ladies, perhaps you should consider a neutral color makeup. All those things in effort to make a great first impression. Again, with our clothing, we should have a dark or neutral base color. It's okay to add warm colors like red or yellow, but only as accents. And of course, the clothing should not be wrinkled. Avoid other clothing like tank tops, short pants, short skirts, etc. Also, one other important thing to remember is that some people are allergic to extra perfumes or cologne, so keep that in mind. Remember to keep your accessories to a minimum. Extra things like too much jewelry or extra bags or briefcases can sometimes be distracting. Self-expression is important to some people, but perhaps should be avoided during an interview. Consider removing extra piercings and concealing tattoos in a professional environment. Matching a corporate culture that dresses business professional generally means a business suit. And ladies, you have the option of a business skirt or pants. Men should include a tie. Business casual often includes nice pants or skirt, shirts with a collar for men, and guess what, men? Ties are generally optional. but we should remember casual does not mean wearing sneakers, jeans, t-shirts, and the like. Casual attire usually allows employees to wear khaki pants and short-sleeve shirts or blouses on a regular basis, and sometimes even jeans on a casual Friday. Some examples of comfortable shoes for those who may be standing all day may be tennis shoes, ballet flats, or something similar but no flip-flops. We've covered a lot of information regarding clothing because it makes a first impression even before we speak. But there are some other nonverbal actions that play a role in creating a first impression as well. I know that being friendly may seem obvious, but we really should be friendly to everyone, not just the person interviewing us. That means the person that scheduled the interview over the phone, people in the office that may not be a part of the interview, and so on. This can be a great way to be remembered if another position in the future becomes available. You can think of this as just another networking opportunity. Eye contact is important because it indicates to another person that you are focused and paying attention. Likewise, a firm handshake indicates also that you are confident in your abilities, not to mention that you are setting a foundation of trust. Employers are more likely to offer you a position if you seem interested in going to work for them, so be sure to express interest. You can express interest in a number of ways, from your tone of voice to your body language, such as leaning forward at times, with good eye contact. Collecting business cards gives you contact information so you can send a thank you letter that same day. And you'll learn from Module 4, Closing the Deal, that thank you notes can reiterate your enthusiasm for the job and keep you in the forefront of the decision making. And finally, asking for a decision date is another way of showing that you are interested in the position. But that shouldn't be the only question that you have. It's also a good idea to have 2 or 3 other questions as well. In Module 1, we learned about how to research labor market information and various information about companies on the Internet. Using that research, we can develop questions to ask during an interview. With today's technology, more and more companies are having virtual interviews or job interviews using video. So it's a good idea to prepare for this new environment as well. We certainly don't want to have the difficulty of logging on to the virtual environment only to find that our technology is not working properly. Testing your technology first means testing your video camera and your microphone to make sure that others can see and hear you. Most people today use wireless technology, so it might be a good idea to have your wireless modem nearby and not in the other room, so the video and audio transmission is as seamless as possible. Your video screen should be close enough that the other person can see you clearly, and that's about 3 feet from your face. This also helps to avoid you competing with other things on your desktop or in the background. Speaking of things in the background, a good idea is to prepare things in the background. Removing excess items and straightening up the room will help show that you are an organized person. Remember not to have any background noise like a radio playing in the background. That can certainly be distracting. Similarly, just having what is absolutely needed active on your PC will help minimize distraction with less technology issues to contend with. Oh, and clothing still counts. No pajama bottoms. Creating a good first impression is important, and we still have less than 30 seconds to do so. Really more like 2 seconds. But it's a good thing that we have some control over this through our interview clothing and other nonverbal actions to help us stand out above the rest. And speaking of nonverbal actions, in our next lesson, Actions Speak Louder Than Words, we'll evaluate nonverbal communication to help us go beyond making a good first impression. In the first lesson of this module, Sharpening Your Interview Skills, we learned how to make a great first impression. But it doesn't stop there. After about 30 seconds, we are still making an impression, only non-verbally. That's why we like to say that actions speak louder than words. There are several categories of nonverbal communication. Body language is a language all its own and can sometimes speak volumes. Let's take a moment and think of what this young lady is speaking through her body language. After observing this picture, we see that she has no eye contact. Her posture is not straight, her hands appear to be nervous. It looks like she has something else on her mind. But how would you, as the hiring manager, interpret her body language? Here's another example. Again, we'll pause for you to take a moment to think of what this young man is communicating without saying a word. Perhaps the first thing that we notice is that through his posture and use of the cell phone, this young man doesn't seem to be interested. His appearance, as we discussed in the first lesson of this module, is certainly not appropriate and is not making a good first impression. And there's no eye contact. Of course, that's because he's reading his phone. We must not forget that facial expression plays a role in nonverbal communication because they help to explain what you are saying. We want to avoid extreme facial expressions because they may be interpreted as something you're not saying. Instead, a simple, warm smile goes a long way. Tone of voice is important as well. That includes volume, speed, and inflection. It's funny how tone of voice can change the meaning of one sentence. Let's listen to a couple of examples.
I am very confident I'm the best person for the job.
I'm very confident I'm the best candidate for this job.
I'm very confident that I'm the best candidate for this job.
So we see how nonverbal communication plays a critical role in making a good impression. As we saw in the earlier lesson, first impressions happen in just a few seconds, while nonverbal communication continues throughout the whole interview. Body language, facial expression, appearance, and tone of voice all play a key role to making an overall good first impression. In the next lesson, we're going to take a look at an interview and give good constructive feedback according to a rubric. Hope to see you there. In the first lesson, we discussed how to make a great first impression. In the second lesson, we learned how we can continue building a great first impression through nonverbal communication and how they sometimes speak louder than words. Now let's put those things we've learned into practice by evaluating an interview. In a moment, we're going to take a look at part of an interview and later use an evaluation chart to provide feedback on how well the candidate interviewed. You could also use that same evaluation chart as a guide for your own interview preparation.
I am so sorry I'm late.
That's all right, Miss Sandra. What happened? Did you have some difficulty in traffic?
No, that girl out there, your secretary, I guess who she was, she gave me such bad directions. Has she been with you long? I mean, I tell you, well, you know what, I'm really glad that, like there weren't any cops because, I've had to drive a little extra fast because, the lights on the street, I can't believe how many lights there were. Does, everybody here dress like you are? I'm assuming you probably, want my resume. Here's my resume. I'm sorry. I see that my phone's ringing. Excuse me.
This and the following slides will include an evaluation chart that you can follow to evaluate the video that we just saw. And you can use this for yourself in preparing for an interview. We can easily evaluate the video we just saw as unacceptable with regard to the volume of the candidate's voice and even her tone of voice. But please remember, you should have a clear voice, project well, and have a good tone. The interview candidate did have eye contact, so would you score acceptable? As we learned in the first lesson of this module, First Impressions, eye contact is very important because it indicates that you are focused and paying attention. That doesn't mean trying to look into another person's soul, but just making sure that your eyes meet frequently. And there's, of course, body language. The interview candidate had an unacceptable body language. Notice these descriptions are nonverbal actions similar to what we've discussed in the second lesson of this module, actions speak louder than words. Please note that we are not talking about people who have a disability that makes it difficult to sit still or affects the volume of their voice. Critical components of the content include identifying yourself and sharing your skills and accomplishments as they relate to the position that you are applying for. An exceptional score includes those critical components but also in an engaging manner. Again, we are talking here about tone of voice. You can view this lesson again to view the evaluation chart that we used to evaluate the interview we saw earlier. Another great lesson is called Tell Me About Yourself 30-Second Commercial. In that lesson, we cover an effective way to answer interview questions, even the most popular one, Tell me about yourself, and we show you how to do that in 30 seconds or less. Here we go. We've learned how to make a great first impression and utilize nonverbal communication effectively so we can be remembered. And we have a tool that we can use to evaluate how we do during an interview. And there are additional tools available at Workforce Solutions online. That's wrksolutions.com. Feel free to view these lessons and more at your own pace. But for now, let's finish this module with a knowledge check. Take a moment and answer the following statements true or false. A first impression is made in 1 to 2 minutes. The answer is false. Clothing worn during an interview is the same as clothing worn on the job. The answer is false. Nonverbal communication plays an important role in making a first impression. The answer is true. Answers to interview questions should be related to the job that you are applying for. The answer is true. Congratulations! You completed this module, Sharpening Your Interview Skills. Workforce Solutions wishes you the best of luck in your job search.